Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Album of Record podcast. I'm Craig Lindell, joined as always by Andrew Schnitke. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going pretty good, Craig. It's Pi Day. Happy Pi Day.
Happy Pi Day.
If you really want to get into the spirit of the day, you can go on YouTube and search for After the Burial Pi. Search for that and read the description and listen to the song. It's the most ridiculous thing, and I can't even begin to understand. They somehow are incorporating pi into their time signature in the song, and it's really crazy. So that's my gift to you on Pi Day.
I always think of the Darren Aronofsky movie, and I love that. I think I love that movie. I loved it way back in the day, but it's not one that I revisit all the time. So
yeah,
maybe I should just leave it as, oh, that's a movie that I love. You know how sometimes you revisit a movie and you're like, oh, this isn't what I hoped it would be.
Yeah, dude. I saw that movie in the dorms when I was in college, and I haven't seen it since. I
probably
really
on VHS.
Don't remember it. Yeah, maybe, possibly. I don't even remember.
So we didn't have a DVD player until probably my junior year of college, when somebody finally bought one and brought it in, and we were off campus in an apartment at that time.
Yeah. No, my TV, when I went into the dorms, I brought with me one of those little combo TV VHS units. So that was what I had. So yeah.
I'll never forget that. It's not even an important story, but I'll never forget that we had that DVD player, right? And it's early technology. You never want to buy version 1.0 of basically any technology in the world. And my roommate and his girlfriend rented a movie on DVD. And wouldn't you know it, that's the time when the DVD player kind of crapped out and it didn't play and it didn't work. And you effing DVD player, I'll never use DVDs ever again. Like, he damned the entire technology because the one time he went to use it, it didn't work. He was going to be kind, rewind for the rest of his life.
I thought I was going to make the joke. I was going to say, I thought you were going to say he was trying to figure out how to rewind the DVD after you were done.
No, but old stories from old people aside, we are talking today.
If we have any younger listeners, they have no clue what we're talking about with the rewind thing.
I think we did a good job of relating. They know we're crusty and old.
That's right.
We're talking about sophomore records today. The sophomore slump, the sophomore surge. Specifically, we want to talk about that record because it's such an important one in the career. Andrew, you kind of came up with this topic a little more so than I did. So I'm going to let you set it up a little bit. Why did you pick the sophomore record?
So it would have been one thing to just say, hey, let's talk about bands who made great sophomore albums, right? But I kind of thought it was cool to talk about it in context, because I actually think a sophomore album can be sort of a fork in the road kind of album for a lot of bands. I really view that as three different paths you can go on. You have the bands who made an awesome debut album that was a huge hit, and then they had to follow that up. So in that case, there's a lot of pressure to follow that up. Then you have the bands who made a pretty good first album, but maybe it didn't quite catch on, and then there's pressure for that second album. Can they take it up a level and get to that next level? And then I also think, unfortunately for some bands, there's the sophomore album that's the dud, and that can sometimes define a band as a one-hit wonder. There's been so many bands that have put out hugely influential albums to this day that people still remember that eventually went on to, they couldn't really follow it up, and they're never known for anything but that one album. So I sort of view it as a interesting, fork in the road, career defining kind of album.
So let's start with some of the ones that had the phenomenal debut and they couldn't follow it.
The most obvious one, I think, is Hootie and the Blowfish. That what Cracked Rear View was.
Yeah.
Is to this day, I believe, still a top 5 selling album of all time. I know it's way up there.
I want to be with you.
I mean, it was huge. It was everywhere. It was absolutely massive. And, they followed it up with Fairweather Johnson, which I'm guessing you probably can't name a song without looking it up. I certainly can't. I don't know how many albums they have put out, but they've continued to be a band. They tour, like they can still go play shows. Well, I don't know if they still do anymore. I think I won't call him Hootie because it's not fair. Darius Rucker, does a lot of things on his own, but but that was to me one of the biggest ones that just they're forever defined by Cracked Rear View because Fairweather Johnson didn't do anything. Do you even remember listening to that album?
No, and I actually didn't listen to the first one. That was a time period where, and we've talked about it before, it was a time period where you had to keep your powder dry in terms of buying records.
Oh, for sure.
And even by the time, because Cracked Rear View sold so many copies that you couldn't move in a used record store without finding 7 copies in the dollar bin. And it never made any sense to me to even bother buying it. And so I never really did. And it was all over the radio.
Yeah, you'd heard those songs everywhere. And like, I didn't love those songs, but like, looking back at it, like you can tell they're well-crafted songs, like for what they are, like it's easy to see why it appealed to so many people. But I'm with you. I didn't own Cracked Rear View either, but that's just whenever I think of a band that like just had the sophomore slump or dud or whatever you want to call it, like to me that's a prime example.
That's a really good one. And by the way, Darius Rucker has gone on to be wildly successful and probably did the most famous, or maybe one of the most famous versions of Wagon Wheel, which
that's right.
Wagon Wheel is, I didn't even know about it. Like it wasn't on my radar, this song, but I'm friends with all these musicians who play lots and lots of, they're professional musicians where they play bar gigs all the time, or like the restaurant that wants music and you show up with your small PA and your acoustic guitar and you play in the corner and you play some covers, you might play 1 or 2 originals. All those types of musicians are asked to play Wagon Wheel. It is like if everybody jokes about play some Skinner, in real life people will ask you to play Wagon Wheel.
Yeah.
And it's the bane of many of their some just learn it and play it because it's popular and you might as well get some love, and other people absolutely refuse to ever play Wagon Wheel.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
So that's a good example. I never really listened to either one of those records, but that was a dollar bin spectacular.
Absolutely.
And any other failures?
I mean, certainly, like I can think of like Spin Doctors.
Pocket Full of Kryptonite was the debut.
And then it was Turn It Upside Down was their sophomore album. And, I couldn't name you a single song off of that. Another one that I think is kind of interesting, and there actually will be some fans, because I know a fan of this band who like argues with me that like my take on this band is wrong. But Third Eye Blind, that debut album was really good, like really, really good. And I'll stand by that. Like that was a good album. And then their follow-up was Blue. And again, like nobody knows that, but they maintained like a hardcore set of fans. Like to this day, Third Eye Blind actually has a very like hardcore set of fans who stand by all of their albums. They think they're all great.
They're on all the festival circuits. They play shows all the time. So Third Eye Blind is one of those bands that was on the radio, and I refused to listen to them because I dismissed them based on the name alone, because I was a big Tool fan, and Third Eye Blind just went against everything that I thought was cool at the moment, and I just thought I was above it, and I refused to listen to it. But much later, I've gone back and I actually appreciate what they did then, and I appreciate them their entire career now.
This is why Craig and I are friends, because like that's my exact same experience with them. Like when Semi-Charmed Life came out, like that song was so poppy that it was an affront to the kind of music I was listening to at that time, that like I didn't want music to go sort of in that direction. But years later, I did listen. I actually bought the album and I I'll listen to that whole album to this day. Like I think it's a really good album.
Yeah.
But
Well, and even in
yeah.
the moment when they released Jumper, that's when I came around, and I didn't tell anybody I liked that song, but I used
Yes.
to sing it in my car.
Yeah, because it's such a good song. Like
Yeah.
dude, like that chord progression is so good on that. Like it's and the guitar tone on that is really good. And then when they did Graduate, like that had a little bite to it too. So then it was like, okay, like I can get behind this, and
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. I got one for you.
Oh yeah.
Congratulations, I'm sorry. I stumped him.
You did.
It is the follow-up for the Gin Blossoms' New Miserable Experience.
Oh, wow, that's a good one. Oh my God, that's a good one. So my band in high school, we covered Hey Jealousy. Like that was a song we played. Like that's a really good one. Yeah.
And so the Gin Blossoms are a band that I bought the record. I turned on it because I didn't think it was cool enough in the moment when I still owned it. I sold it to the used record store. And then much later, I really do appreciate it again. I went, it was probably a year or so before the pandemic. A buddy and I went to the Roxino on a lark. It was kind of a goof night, but we went to see Collective Soul, and the Gin Blossoms opened up. And this was one of the first times in my kind of late 30s, early 40s where I just kind of embraced the nostalgia factor, and I allowed myself collectives. I know you're a big Collective Soul fan. They were so good, and I wasn't ready for it because I had kind of written them off as well.
So you're foreshadowing here a little bit with that one.
All right, let's do it.
Let's not get to that just yet. I want to mention two other things real quick. One album that I wanted to talk about is actually the Toadies in this category. When Rubberneck came out, I believe it was 94. Maybe it was later that. Maybe it was 96. I can't remember. But when Rubberneck
and remind
came
everybody
out,
what the Toadies were famous for, because even some people might not know.
Yeah. So, well, I suppose you could argue they were a bit of a one-hit wonder, although they actually had I Come From the Water got like some radio play, and there's another one that
but it was Possum Kingdom.
Yeah, Possum Kingdom is obviously the song everybody knows. That was the hit. There's another Tyler was played on the radio. I think there even might have been another one, but we talked about
Mr. Love, Away, Tyler, Backslider, and I Come From the Water.
Yeah, Away was another good one too. So when that album came out, when we did our episode of bands that held the belt, I didn't talk about them in that episode, but the Toadies were actually they were an honorable mention of mine that I just didn't get around to talking about. But I loved Rubberneck. Like that album, I listened to it so much that it was one of those ones that the CD got so scratched up that it started skipping. That's how much I was constantly playing it. And then they kind of disappeared for a while. Like they never put out a follow-up for a long time until I think 2001. I know I was in college when they put out Hell Below, Stars Above, their follow-up. And that's when it just got no traction. Nobody listened to it. But the way I talked about some people I know with Third Eye Blind, that's how I am with the Toadies. I've listened to every single one of their albums. I listen to them quite a bit. And I stand by These Is All Good, but that was one that was an absolute dud. So I wanted to talk about that album. And then I wanted to mention the fact that the whole post-grunge era just had tons of bands that put out these huge ubiquitous albums that they never really followed up. Well, they put out albums and nobody would listen to them. So I'm thinking of Space Hog. They followed theirs up with the Chinese album.
And everybody knows In the Meantime.
Absolutely. What a great song. Harvey Danger, Flagpole
Sitta.
Their follow-up was King James Version, which nobody listened to.
However, Harvey, and this is another, I have an example of this one, of this type of band. but Harvey Danger has diehard fans to this day.
Yes, they are very well
swear
respected.
by their entire catalog.
Very well respected. Yep. They put out an album. I don't know if it was for free, but they put it out on their own on the internet. They released it and that was a really good album. I don't remember what that was called off the top of my head, but
I don't want to steal your thunder.
And then another one I had was Seven Mary 3.
I hated them, in the moment. I don't like them now. The affectation on that dude's voice, I can't. I mean,
it's post grunge.
It was a ginormous album.
Post grunge. But their follow up was Rock Crown, which I think is actually better. But I mean, nobody really listened to that. And then even like I'm trying to remember what was the Godsmack. Did they put? I don't remember their follow up. I don't think that one really went anywhere. So there's just
a giant band. I'm not sure that they ever put out a total dud.
Yeah,
I was not a big fan.
I wasn't either. I saw them open for Metallica. They were okay, but yeah. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that you had this whole era of post grunge that all those bands and there's other ones that some of them I guess probably weren't debuts, like Sugar Ray. Theirs wasn't their debut that was big, but they never followed that one up. But so that was kind of like a weird phenomenon of that period was the
when there are a lot of bands like that. So like a band like Blues Traveler. So Blues Traveler releases 4, but it was definitely not their first album. It's just the first album that anybody knows.
That's right.
And they couldn't follow it. So they couldn't follow it, but it wasn't their sophomore record that they couldn't follow it.
So they don't get to be on this list, but it is a phenomenon for sure.
But I will say, as somebody who's a mild Blues Traveler fan, there are a couple songs on that record after 4 which are just phenomenal. Just none of them are Run Around Hook or The Mountains Win Again. I mean, that's just what it is. All right. Another example of a sophomore record that did not at all live up to the debut, but I will just stand behind, is Soup by Blind Melon.
Yes. Oh, that is a damn good album. That is a very good album.
But not if you ask the general public.
For sure.
That was the No Rain.
Did that come out after Shannon died?
No.
There was another one that came out after Soup that was after he died then, right? Because they put one out after he died.
Yes, they had a posthumous release for sure. Yeah. And then the big example that we have to talk about that everybody's going to think about that's like this, that was a dud in the moment, but everybody pretends that they were all in on it forever and ever and ever, is Pinkerton by Weezer.
See, this is a tricky one. This is a really tricky one.
So it can be tricky, but there's no denying my retelling of what it was in the moment. It bombed from a sales standpoint, and today everybody's changed their mind, and it is goated, as the kids say.
So it's probably in the pantheon of most famous reviews is the Rolling Stone review of Pinkerton.
I don't know about this.
Which to this day, I think a lot of people blame for the way people perceived Pinkerton. I remember I was with my best friend in high school. We went to go get it the day it came out, put it in his CD player in his car, listened to it on the way home, and we just loved it. We were like, this is incredible. And then we saw the Rolling Stone review, and the Rolling Stone review just obliterated it. And it really took hold and got a lot of traction. And all of a sudden, well, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, because I don't know how people really perceived it, and who perceived it before or after reading that review. But to me, it was definitely a dramatic change in vibe from the Blue album. I don't know that I would say it was a dramatic shift per se in, I mean, to some degree and so the Blue album is this upbeat feeling, surf rock almost kind of vibe that it had. And Pinkerton,
let me add some context from the research, because Rivers Cuomo released some comments to his fan club back in the day before the album was released, And he said, "There's some lyrics on the album that you might think are mean or sexist. I will feel genuinely bad if anyone feels hurt by my lyrics, but I really wanted these songs to be an exploration of my dark side, all the parts of myself that I was either afraid or embarrassed to think about before. So there's some pretty nasty stuff on there."
And he isn't wrong about that. I mean,
but that's not exactly selling it, is it?
No, and I don't think I probably picked up on it at that time, at that age. I don't think I was in a, growing up like relatively sheltered in a small town, like in rural Northwest Ohio, like I don't think I probably even had the capacity to understand why the lyrics were problematic. I certainly recognize it now. But just musically for me, there was so much more texture and depth and just variation in what they were doing that I just thought was fantastic when I first heard it. But there's no question that it was a critical flop. The sales were a flop, and it had a massive impact on Rivers for the rest of his life. Like to this day, I still contend like Rivers is somewhat scared to write a full good album because of the sort of fallout of Pinkerton.
Well, and a lot of I'm not a Weezer scholar, so I don't know all this stuff like the back of my hand, but I remember reading somewhere, a lot of my memories are fuzzy now, but I remember reading that for a while he was charting the greatest records of all time and almost treating his songwriting like a math project where he needed to verify before he would trust that what he was doing was quality. And maybe that a lot of those were the scars. Maybe he's just a geek and he always would have ended up there, but maybe it was also fed by the scars of Pinkerton not landing.
Yeah. And it was funny too, because like many years later when they put out, oh my gosh, I'm so bad with album names and song names these days, but the album that had Back to the Shack on it, I can't remember what that album was, but I loved that album. It felt like a return to form. And he sort of addressed in the song itself, sort of like the new Rivers, like he was not going to be afraid anymore to write classic Weezer songs. And I really liked that album a lot. And like 2 albums later, he was back to just like doing the same stuff he's always done, which is just writing these. I don't want to get into this. Isn't the Weezer episode. I don't want to get into my thoughts on it.
But that record was called "Everything Will Be All Right in
the End." Yep. So anyways, but it's funny that because like, so you're 100% right about this album being in this category, but I had it in another category. I had it in the follow-up to the hit debut, like bands that actually landed the follow-up, because I was thinking about it more from probably my own perception of that album, because I always loved it. But
well, and in the end it did land.
It did.
It took like, it's like one of those movies that flops in the box office and then went bananas at Blockbuster when we were kids.
Yeah.
And there were always going to be movies. There are always going to be records like that too. And think what you want about Weezer. They're still one of the most popular bands in the world today.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I'm not sure. Let's go to the ones that broke bands.
Yeah, that was kind of where I wanted to go next.
All right, you go first. Let's trade them back and forth.
Okay, well, I mean, should I take the lowest of low-hanging fruits here?
Of course.
It's Nirvana. I mean, Nevermind. I mean, they're probably...
Oh, no, that was their first record, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, there is a fair amount of people that might think that. And that's just to the degree to which that album blew up. Because when they put out
never
Bleach,
forget the intro to About a Girl on Unplugged, where Kurt says, this is from our first record. You probably don't know it.
Yep.
Or whatever.
And what's funny about that too is like, because a lot of people didn't go back to Bleach. Like a lot of people I knew never listened to Bleach. Like it was...
So I never owned Bleach. My friend owned Bleach. And so I never bought it, but I did buy Incesticide.
Oh yeah.
So like, I'll admit I was not I was more Pearl Jam, less Nirvana.
Oh,
and I said, in those days, I had to keep my powder dry. I couldn't buy everything.
Yeah, I So for me, I did not really become a massive Nirvana fan until In Utero, actually, which is my favorite Nirvana album. And I,
Right, their second
so many,
record. Got it.
so many, yeah, so many people like think that's like a hipster take, like, oh, In Utero is my favorite, not Nevermind. But like, from where I came from, like my background in music, In Utero is more musically interesting to me than Nevermind is. But Nevermind has the hooks, man. Like that album, like the hooks, just the catchy hooks Kurt was writing with his vocal melodies were insane. And that
Well, and
album
I felt
was,
like Nevermind taught me things, and we'll talk about Nevermind another day. But
yeah,
like, I had never heard anything like Territorial Pissings until
right.
I heard Nirvana.
Yeah.
Nevermind.
So that's the obvious one. I'll get that one out of the way and let you go next.
All right, I'm going off the map here. I'm gonna go live throwing copper.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So I have an older sister who went to college in '94, and so I was exposed to quote unquote college rock, kind of a little bit earlier than most of my friends.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she came back from break with was Mental Jewelry by Live. And so I had listened to Operation, it's not Operation Freedom.
I'm
It's
not
like
going to know.
whatever. There's some goofy songs on Mental Jewelry, and then by the time Throwing Copper came out, I was already on, and I started listening to that record, and that one just went insane. Between
Yeah.
Lightning
Oh,
Crashes,
yeah.
Selling the Drama, we talked
High
about this one
Alone.
already
Yeah.
in a previous episode.
Yeah.
I can't stand it today, but I know a lot of people, and I'm not judging anybody who still likes it. That's cool, man. But I know a
Yeah.
lot of people still love that record to this day.
Yep. Awesome. Um, I'm going to skip the next obvious grunge one I was going to talk about. Instead, since we foreshadowed it, I'll touch on Collective Soul. Um, Now, this one is a little bit interesting in this category because obviously Shine was such a massive hit off of Hints, Allegations, and Things Left Unsaid. But that album was not particularly well received as an album. And I think a lot of people thought that Collective Soul was just going to be a one hit wonder. And then when they put out their self-titled album, the follow-up, that one really blew up in terms of establishing them as a legit, like, good band. Now, people can argue with me how they feel about Collective Soul, but like that album, bona fide, just loaded with hits.
Yeah. So you're talking about the self-titled album that came out in March 1995. So I'm the research guy. So I'm going to read you a little bit.
Yeah.
So the singles from the second record, just in case you think it wasn't a smash, were Gel, December, Smashing Young Man, The World I Know, and Where the River Flows.
Yeah.
And The World I Know was such a ginormous song because it played on mainstream rock, it played on adult contemporary. It was the ultimate crossover where as long as it wasn't hip hop or rap, you could play it on your radio station. Easy listening.
Yep. And I think in Gel, certainly Gel, and to some degree December, kind of hit on some of the alternative rock stations as well. Like, I mean, Collective Soul played at Woodstock 99. They legit could fit into that rock world, and it's mostly because of that album that put them in that category. So it's like I said, this one's a little bit cheating because their biggest hit to this day is still Shine. Like that's probably the song people first think of.
They could have been like Radiohead,
Which I also have in this category.
All right, let's go there.
All right. Do you want it or you want me to take it?
You take it.
So, okay. So then we have to do the bends then. So Pablo Honey was their debut that had Creep. And that's, again, the song that everybody knows, and probably the song Radiohead is most known for today is still Creep. And it's a great song. I love that song. It's a great karaoke song. I love doing karaoke for that song when you get to really nail the parts at the end. But the Bends, when that came out, that was the one that established them as like, oh my God, like this band is on another level. And that's the one that is like, it absolutely took them into the next stratosphere. And Street Spirit, like, is a song that for me, that when I remember that video. Do you remember the video for Street Spirit,
Yeah.
where it was filmed at a higher frame rate, and so everything looks like it's going really slow? Like, it was mesmerizing. Like, it was just incredible. But then
Well, and
obviously Fake Plastic
I'll go on
Trees
record and say that Street Spirit might be one of my favorite songs of all time. Period.
Yeah, it's
Like, my list is probably 100 or 200 long,
right.
but it's way up there on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Fake Plastic Trees. What was the other one? There's another big one. Just
High and Dry.
High and Dry. Yep. Just was that was another incredible music video. That's probably my favorite music video to this day. That's one where the guy's like just laying down in the street, and like everybody like goes, and then everybody starts laying down beside him. It's just absolutely incredible.
Well, in hindsight, was it My Iron Lung that kind of pointed to what they would become and kind of the craziness?
That could be like it's such a dynamic album. Like, there's just
it's My Iron Lung, where it's got he's like singing, and then it breaks into almost a completely different breakaway section song, and that kind of it foretold where they were going with OK Computer.
Yep, because I mean, you had like the title track, and just like those songs were like hard, like aggressive songs. You had like I said, Karma Police. Wait, no, Karma.
That was OK Computer.
That was OK Computer, but Fake Plastic Trees was Ben's.
The Ben's.
That one, showed a more dynamic side of them. Street Spirit, like we said, is like this haunting, like beautiful song. And then My Iron Lung is the one that like really like goes into the like sort of craziness. So very dynamic album. And yeah.
All right, I got one for you. Oh man, there's so many great ones to choose from. Let's do Siamese Dream.
That's on my list. Yep, for sure.
maybe one of the biggest in terms of Sophomore records, just in terms of band that has an impact to this day. But here's the interesting thing about the Sophomore record. One of the interesting things about the Sophomore record, it really separates the bands who used an entire life's work of creativity to create their debut, and they don't have any ability to recreate that, or they don't have a creative working process that can help them churn out the next record when the pressure is on. And so a guy like Billy Corgan proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was an artist and a writer when he produces. First of all, Gish was a phenomenal debut. Maybe under the radar. It wasn't on a major label until much later. It got picked up and re-released.
It took a long time before I actually listened to Gish. Like, for me, it was just a long time before I went backwards to it. Like I mentioned with Nirvana, I was one of the ones that just started at Siamese Dream, and probably wasn't until I was in college before I went back and like really got into Gish.
So I don't know about my timing here, but I think I had Gish before Siamese Dream, because I think I heard singles first. Then I went back and bought Gish, and then I think Siamese Dream came out. And
okay.
I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong, if I'm hazy on the timing, but I know I had Gish like
you
very
got Gish,
close,
and then you were
period.
disappointed that Drown wasn't on it. Like, why isn't Drown on this?
No, man, I couldn't possibly have been disappointed by Gish. There's so many great songs on that record.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, do you want to take the next one?
Sure. So I'll talk about a band that I talked about already in the Belt Who Held the Belt episode, but Oasis, Morning Glory. When they came out, like, they definitely were getting airplay in the States, and in the UK, this doesn't apply. They were, when Definitely Maybe came out, they were already massive over in the UK. But here in the US, like, as much as like Supersonic got some play, I I don't think that it was like really a huge album here, but when Morning Glory came out, Wonderwall, that took them to the next level. And then Champagne Supernova comes out, and it was just like, that album was just everywhere. And
what I was gonna say, like, Wonderwall is an undeniably great song. Wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, but when I heard
not my favorite song either.
When I heard Champagne Supernova, I knew that this band could do something that was truly, truly special.
Yeah. So yeah, Oasis, Morning Glory.
All right, I'm gonna go smaller, much smaller. And this is the second record that broke the band, which now many would consider them a one-hit wonder because of what happened on their second record, and they felt like they couldn't follow it on their third. That's Hum. You Prefer an Astronaut.
Oh, good pick.
So Hum had an early record that you want to think people didn't hear Bleach. Really, nobody listened to Hum's first record, but then Stars comes out, and it's the perfect timing for where alternative rock radio was, and that song was just ubiquitous. But I talked to more casual music fans in our age group today, and some of them, they'll know Stars if you put it on, but they wouldn't be able to come up with the band name Hum to save their lives.
Yeah. What was their debut called? I don't even remember what the title.
And I love it too. I got to look it up. I can't remember
because Downward was after.
Downward is Heavenward was their third record.
That's why, I also love that album. Yeah.
But the reason why I bring up their first record, it's a crime that I can't remember the name of it, because there was a special edition with an extra song on the end. And I think the extra song on the end might be the very best song on the entire record.
Okay.
And it's funny that I can't even find it. It's crazy.
Yeah, but that's a good pick. And I was super.
Oh no, I think I might have disqualified myself on this one. Technically, they had a first album called Fillet, Fillet Show.
I don't know that I've ever listened to that.
No, I don't think it's in print, so I might be okay. But their first real record was Electra 2000.
Yes. Yep. That's right. So that's interesting. That I really
we'll call that one a demo. Fillet Show was a demo.
Yeah.
We're not going to count that.
Okay. With a
I don't want to be. I can't be wrong on my own podcast.
That's right. That's right. We're the authority. So, with very clever album title, though. I'll give them props for that. So.
Oh yes.
One, I'll touch on the other big grunge one that we got to talk about. Then that's Alice in Chains' Dirt. Facelift. Very good album. I love that album. And again, people were aware of Man in the Box, but like that album didn't really get much traction.
It got some late night MTV play.
Yeah, but Dirt was the one that put them in the like bona fide like Mount Rushmore of grunge bands. It was definitely Dirt.
Yeah, and I know I've told this story before, but it's like to the point where a couple of years ago at the Louder Than Life festival, on day one, or well, whatever, it was 4 days. On one day, Jerry Cantrell played with his solo band, and he played. Yes. And when he plays his solo shows, he plays a couple of Alice in Chains songs, including Wood and Rooster, because he cannot show up on a stage without playing Wood and Rooster. And then the next day, with the version of Alice in Chains that exists today, he also played Wood and Rooster.
Yep.
And nobody complained. We heard it 2 days in a row. Nobody complained.
He's a busy man, Jerry.
Yeah. And Alice in Chains is a really good example, because they took that second record and all the success from that second record, and they used all of that equity to make even more interesting stuff. They didn't even attempt to repeat it. You know, they, with Jar of Flies and all the subsequent things that they did in their career. Maybe I can't think of a band maybe that used their equity better or more. Maybe Pearl Jam?
Yeah, maybe.
So let's just do it.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Okay. So we'll just move on to the bands that had the massive debut album and managed to actually stick the landing with the sophomore album. And of course, the first one we're going to talk about is Versus. Versus is, we're biased, of course, as huge Pearl Jam fans, but to me, Versus is such an unbelievable accomplishment because, 10 blows up. It has all these iconic songs. It's on the radio everywhere. And then I remember
videos on videos.
Yep. And I just remember everybody wondering, how are they going to follow this up? And there was a lot of mystery to Versus because they didn't put any singles out for it ahead of time. All the singles came out after the album came out. So we had heard Animal from the MTV Video Music Awards, where they famously debuted it, which was unbelievable. Like when they came out and played that song, nobody had heard it before. It was just like, oh my God, like this band's going to another level. Like,
so in my memory, I didn't remember that was the debut, but
yeah,
my VHS was rolling that night.
Yeah.
I didn't take any chances. I was that dork.
Yeah. And then this is embarrassing for me to admit, but I remember talking to a friend about it the next day at school, and I was like, yeah, and they played with some old guy, some really old guy. I don't know who that old guy was. And
he would later go on to take his music off Spotify.
Yeah. So of course we're talking about Neil Young. But at that time, I didn't know who Neil Young was. So but yeah, so Versus goes on, sells almost 1 million copies in the first week.
Breaks all the
my
records.
Lights are flickering like crazy, so I might lose power here pretty soon. But did I lose you?
And I am back, but Andrew got cut off by a superstorm down in Columbus. I'm assuming everything's fine, but we will continue this conversation at a later date, but I'm going to bring it all the way up till Versus. I think maybe God was telling us not to talk about Pearl Jam again. Maybe not, but that's where we are for now. We have a lot more to talk about and probably wrap it up. I think we will probably do that, but I wanted to make sure that we've got a podcast in your feeds and on YouTube. So thanks so much for listening, everybody. We will talk to you next time, which might be sooner than next week. Thanks for listening to the Album of Record podcast.